Why does it feel like I'm doing everything right and yet still running on empty? Today, we're talking about why work doesn't just feel hard anymore, it feels draining in a way that's quietly unsustainable. In this episode, I'm sitting down with Amanda Litman, author, political leader, and the co founder of Run for Something. We talk about leadership, flexibility, burnout, and why so many workplaces are still designed for a life stage that no longer exists, especially if you're a caregiver. If you've ever wondered whether work is supposed to feel like this exhausting, then this conversation's for you. See you inside. Hey y'all, I'm your host, Courtney Cecil, and welcome back to the Life Management System. Inside this episode, I'm hosting a force of all forces, Amanda Litman. Amanda's the co-founder and president of Run for Something, which recruits and supports young, diverse leaders running for local office and has helped launch the careers of thousands of millennials and Gen Z candidates. So we want her in our corner. In addition to being a wife and mom of two, Amanda spent much of her career navigating the political landscape, including working on multiple presidential campaigns. But y'all, I brought her here for a different purpose today, and that's to hear the voice behind the words inside her latest book, When We're in Charge, The Next Generation's Guide to Leadership, which came out in the middle of last year. So, inside that book, Amanda confronts, like with a giant magnum light, that still, yet for whatever reason, tolerated leadership style and the policies of past. So, inside the book, she challenges leaders to be more progressive with their policies in support of changing talent pool, aka us, and the different societal norms that we've been experiencing, particularly post-pandemic. And of course, that includes caregivers. So y'all can expect fully, especially given my past in culture transformation, why Amanda was just a magnet for me. So inside her book, she actually brings to light more than just a soft suggestion. She has treated her book like a roadmap that is absolutely critical for organizations to adopt in order to remain relevant, whether that be with us or the up and coming young talent that will really make the America of tomorrow. So, Amanda, first, welcome to the Life Management System, and second, is there anything you want to fine point about my introduction before we dig in?
No, that was such a generous introduction. Thank you for that. I loved it.
Isn't it really uncomfortable when you get your introduction read in front of you? You're like, oh boy.
I can like feel my cheeks warming. It's very embarrassing, but I appreciate the generosity with that. So I thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's get to it. Inside your book, again, I will link all this in the show notes, but it is called When We're in Charge, The Next Generation's Guide to Leadership. So inside your book, you talk about how work sucks for a lot of people, especially working parents. How do you define work that quote unquote sucks versus work that's just hard, but yet a healthy kind of hard? And what does that look like day to day, in particular for a working mom?
I'm so glad you asked me this question because one, it really reinforces how sucks is my eloquent term. uh, but I think that people know the distinction when they feel it. Work can and should be hard. I think that there's incredible dignity in doing hard work. I am a hard worker. I believe in hard work. And there is a distinction between work that is hard and work that is intentionally miserable. And I think work sucking is a choice that leaders are making. So some of the things that make work sucky. Inflexible hours or a lack of transparency about how you should be spending your time, unclear expectations and definitions of what success looks like, a place where you feel like you cannot be your real self, or where you are encouraged to bring your full self in to a space that's not well suited to contain it, a place where you do not feel psychologically safe, a place that has created unclear communication norms so you're not always understanding like how to get things done in a way that feels sometimes intentional on behalf of leadership, and ultimately a work that does not treat you like an adult with dignity and respect. I think for caregivers of all kinds, whether you're caring for kids or caring for aging parents or elderly in your life, in order to balance both your life outside of work and your life at work. And since we spend something like 40 hours of our life at work, I often think about it as, work life integration, not work work life balance. Um, if you are going to make that happen, your place of employment has to be accommodating to the challenges of your life stage. And when it does that, when your employer does that, everyone else also benefits.
So I think it's great, Amanda, that you called out essentially that it should be table stakes to be trusted to be an adult
Yeah.
and do adult things. I actually, even before you said those words, when I was hearing the themes of what you're saying, I was like, ooh, she's essentially saying our organizations need to trust us to do what we're being paid to do. And
Well,
oftentimes they don't.
and they need to give us the constraints within which to like maintain that trust. Like you need to tell me what success looks like, and then you have to trust me to do it. You need to make it clear how I get things done with this environment, and then you need to trust me to follow through with it. And you need to hold me accountable when I don't. And I,
Yeah.
as an employer or employee rather in this hypothetical, I need to follow through with that. I need to ask clarifying questions. I need to take ownership of my work and my time and my schedule. I need to put up clear boundaries, but also I need to be good at my job. Like both of
Yeah.
those things are true. And I think part of what I try to write through in When We're in Charge is what is on the what lays on the responsibility of the employer and what lays on the responsibility of the employee, and how do you make that clear as the boss? Because When We're in Charge is really directed towards the folks in positions of leadership, of how to think about how to do it differently, not just modeling the crappy leaders that many of us came up working for.
Yeah, I love that you called that out. So, many of my listeners know that I came from a place of culture transformation, and ironically, just this past Friday was speaking to an organization about what I call a social contract, and that is more or less what you just talked about, Amanda. That's the handshake between the employer and the employee, saying, "Here's our expectations of you." And what this organization said to me before we went in, and they were doing it all in the best interest of serving their employees, but they said, ooh, we thought that by not setting expectations we were actually giving more people more freedom. I'm like, ooh, actually it makes it harder for people to know how they show up, so it
Mhm.
means that they're stuck always feeling on, always feeling like they're having to perform, never knowing what guardrails exist, which ultimately leads to burnout. So I actually fully appreciate the spirit behind what they were trying to do, but I do believe that having, a more declared handshake can actually be more freeing, because then you know where you have liberty to color outside the lines and not.
I mean, one of the most interesting things I heard when I was talking to more than 130 different leaders for the book, across a bunch of different sectors, was how many talked about, relevant to this conversation, their style of parenting as it relates to their style of leadership. Anyone who's ever had to deal with little kids like knows you don't tell the toddler do what you want, or like what do you want to wear today. You ask the toddler red shirt or blue shirt. You ask the toddler like this shoe first or that shoe first. You give them choices, you create structures, and then give them autonomy within that structure. I'm not saying treat your employees like toddlers, absolutely not. But the same is true in the workplace, that you need to create the container so that people know how much latitude they have to play. And
Yeah.
it's like disorienting to be somewhere where you don't know what success looks like. It
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah, it does. It does. I think that, I guess, in the spirit of work sucks,
Mm,
altogether, a lot of people have tendencies to think that we spend the majority of our day at work. But
mhm,
actually, when you take a step back, it's almost 50-50. But it's just that we tend to live more often than not in environments that are misaligned with us in some way, shape, or form. So it gives us this impression that work has so much of us, like it takes away so much of us. But really, when you do the math, it is almost 50-50, our
mm,
time each day outside of work versus what's inside work. So finding that alignment and knowing how you're positioned to be at your best and really perform and do what you do well can be so just freeing. um,
mhm.
so to pull on that thread a little bit more, Amanda, let's pretend hypothetically we get all of these leaders that you're talking about and you wrote the book for in a room at once. What message, what core message would you like them to walk away with that you believe, would really distill your message down for them?
I'd say two things. One, the way we did things yesterday does not have to be the way we do them tomorrow. That you are not beholden to tradition or to, the way things are done here. That you do not have to take every example that has been set for you by every boss you've ever had. That's not to say you shouldn't be informed by it, but that you actually have a lot of freedom and agency to change things once you are in a position of power. The second is that creating a crappy workplace or being a shitty boss is a choice. Similarly, you have agency. Like you can decide, let's say you take over a company and people have always been, you know, in office 5 days a week and like really strict time check, you could decide to do it differently. And you can be really intentional about creating the structures and processes such that people could work from home or work remote and could be flexible. And that will require a lot of work on your behalf. And in many cases, it is easier to be a bad boss. Requires much less intentionality. But that means it is a choice. So the thing that I always come back to when I'm talking to leaders, to executives, even to political candidates is like, it is harder to do this well. It is absolutely worth it. And I think you can and you should.
Yeah, I love that you called that out. It's the same, I call it carefrontational conversation that I have with the leaders that I've supported. And I want to continue double clicking on this point, Amanda. I remember I led Future of Work for my, I guess it's been 2 organizations ago. We were coming out of the pandemic. We had about 12,000 employees across multiple countries that we were helping navigate. And I pulled in this notion of the social contract, which we just talked about, essentially that handshake between what the organization expects and the liberties and freedoms that the people have, our employees have, so they'll know how to show up. And one of the things that I was trying to help bring to life there is this notion of, just because, to your point, just because you used to do it like that doesn't mean we need to do it like that anymore. We have learned and grown. Technology is different. The way that we've learned to work together is different. Goodness, coming into the pandemic, we were hopping across the plane every time we needed to do work together because video conference was hardly a thing. We were on conference calls, like
Mhm.
it was just a different world. So we can't ignore that what we have available to us has changed, but also we have proven through this experiment that it doesn't have to be like it was. And yet the amount of pushback I got was astronomical. I remember one of my mentors, actually, I think very highly of her. It was like 9 o'clock at night, and she and I were probably both in tears. I remember I'm pretty sure there was tears, pretty sure it was for both of us, because we both felt so passionate about our point of view around, like it doesn't have to be like that. And she's like, but this is how, essentially that's how she and the rest of the leadership team grew into success.
Mhm.
Ergo, that's the way success happens. And it took a little bit to work through that friction. And I'm not sure if I ever won her over as much as she just, called pinochle and gave up because she knew she had become the minority voice. But it was a very tense transition to work through that for many of the leaders. And I think part of it was exactly what you just said, Amanda, that it would require more work from them to be intentional. Because then when you are together, you have to be incredibly thoughtful about what you do and how you do it. You can't just happen into your week and walk outside and know that all of your people are at your fingertips. You have to be very thoughtful in your planning, and that was a muscle that many of the leaders had not built because they hadn't needed to. So, what would you say, or how would you respond to a leader who believes that the way that they did life, the way that they got results, the experience that they had is the only way to do it?
I think especially for those folks, they are coming out of like, I worked my ass off. I had to suffer, and suffering is what got me good at this. And you should suffer too, because that will get you good at this. I fully reject that premise. I will say suffers are like hyperbolically, but it's like, I worked 100-hour weeks. I got yelled at by my bosses. I had to like sort of get professionally hazed. It was terrible. I had to do all the bitch work and the grunt work, and it was terrible. And I hated it every second, but it made me tougher. It's like, no, it didn't. And it didn't have to be that way. That was a failure of leadership on behalf of your bosses.
Yeah.
I like want to really encourage people to gut check your assumptions here. Did that actually make you better, or did it just give you more time to learn the skills you needed? And was someone more intentional because they were failing to like aggressively mentor you or proactively mentor you? Did you just need more brute force repetition? I've worked 100-hour weeks. I worked on presidential campaigns. How many of those hours was I wasting? How many of those hours could I have been spending having a life outside of my job? Not nothing. Not none.
Yeah.
I really do think like we have to gut check our assumptions here about, did the way I did it, does that still make sense for 2026? like given the way that technology has changed, that communication styles have changed, that work has changed, is that still the necessary way in which we have to show up? And if not, what is the new way? Now, one of the things that this creates is a question of like, if I don't do it that way, then how do I do it? And that's really scary because that requires creativity and innovation and thinking outside the box and coming up with something new and maybe failing. That can be really scary. I like to reframe it as an opportunity that you get an opportunity to decide to do it differently in a way that can be transformative. Because if you can make it so that someone doesn't have to be as miserable as you were, or doesn't have to do it the way that you did, and can maybe do it a little better, imagine what you could do for that person's life outside of work. Like if your employees go home every day or are already home, wherever they finish their work day every day, and are like, you know what? That was a hard day's work, but I'm feeling pretty good. Then they're a little bit nicer to their partner, a little bit more patient with their kids. Maybe they have time to volunteer in their community. Maybe they have time to show up at the school or be part of the PTA or, volunteer or protest, whatever it might be. Maybe they can spend more time with their parents or their friends. Maybe they can work out more, whatever it might be. Like your power as a boss is beyond just the outcome of your work. It's the tone you can set for the rest of someone's life outside of it. That is like no small responsibility. Take it seriously that you could make it better. That's an incredible amount of opportunity for you.
Yeah, like be the hero
Yeah.
essentially. Like you have the opportunity to be a steward into a completely new generation. And to your point, Amanda, the butterfly effect of what could happen, and what you could ignite in other people and in society at large is just, I think it's empowering. It's the reason that you and I are doing the type of work we're doing.
Yeah.
But I think that when I pull through the thread of what you just talked about, one of the underlying challenges for many people is that it's the unknown. To your point, like you might not know how you do it,
Yeah.
but as you acknowledge, like step one is identifying the opportunity and honoring the fact that there is one. And I have noticed that a lot of the clients that I work with, a lot of the companies that I speak to, both will see a challenge and and most of them will accept it as reality. Like just because there's a challenge, this is the way it has to be. But my background's in industrial and systems engineering. I'm a trained problem solver. So when I see a problem, I don't I don't accept it as reality. I'm like, how the hell are we going to fix this? So, what let's unpack that how for a second. So, from your perspective, if I was a leader, what are some of those more practical levers that I might be able to push or pull that could actually make my company more attractive, for particularly for working moms, given that that is much of this audience. But I mean, a lot of the stuff is industry agnostic. It is role and life circumstances agnostic. It's just human nature. So what do
Yeah.
you think some of those big hows are? What do those opportunities look like?
I got some like practical things and some more philosophical ones. 4-day work week. I think everyone can and should consider a 4-day work week. I can hear every person listening being like, well, that sounds nice, but not for my industry, not for my company, not for me. I promise you, you probably could. Now, it requires buy-in from the very top of the company. You have to reframe how you think about staffing, deliverables, timelines, expectation setting. What does it mean to have a weekend? How do you do coverage if it's needed? But you are not beholden to the 40-hour work week just because that's how it goes. My company has had a 4-day work week since 2022. We pay people the full salary as if they worked 5 days, but we're closed on Fridays. And I'm very fortunate and grateful. We have 5-day childcare, but 4 days of work, which means on Fridays, I have a day to myself. That's how I wrote When We're in Charge. It's when I go to a yoga class. It's when I see friends for lunch. It's when I get my nails done. It's when I rot on the couch and watch Grey's Anatomy from the night before. It's when I clean and mop the kitchen. Like it is transformative for me, both as a person and as a parent, because I go into the weekend with my kids actually well rested. I'm like a little bit refreshed. So,
And before you go into the next one too, Amanda, one thing
yep.
that I want to call out here that most people don't realize is the reason we have a 5-day work week is Henry Ford. So
Mm-hmm.
it used to be a 6-day work week because we were in an agricultural era as a society, as a nation in particular. And then it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution when Henry Ford stood up Ford Motor Company and he realized, oh, nobody is buying my cars. Well, the reason nobody was buying his cars is because they lived in a 6-day work week. So he started with his organization. He said, I'm going to make Ford Motor Company a 5-day work week. And that way my employees have enough time to actually take off and actually drive a car. And he created this complete economical shift because he wanted to sell cars.
Mhm.
But the economics, the lifestyle changes, the everything worked in favor of actually supporting a 5-day work week because we were no longer in this agricultural era. And what you're calling upon with the notion of a 4-day work week is the era we're working in right now. That we
Mhm.
need a couple big name organizations like a Ford Motor Company to stand up and say, let's challenge the status quo here. Does it make sense? I can be the next Henry Ford.
Yeah.
And I think that the work you're doing to evangelize that is meaningful. And I'm anxious for the first person that's going to take hold.
I think it is sooner than you'd think because I suspect, and one, it's in a lot of the union negotiations around, especially from like the auto workers, something
Hmm.
UAW has been arguing for as part of the industry. So I will be fascinated to see what comes of it. Finland, I believe, has a 4-day work week, and I would love to move to Finland. It seems very nice there. There is a lot of pros to it. Basically, all of the research around it shows no impact on productivity and incredible impact on work-life balance, on reducing burnout, on reducing anxiety, increasing job satisfaction, and even things like lowering your electricity bills, increasing your physical health. It is one day of work, one one day for you, one day for rest, one day for community is so powerful when you have a 3-day weekend every weekend.
Yeah,
Like,
and there's not many reasons that you couldn't experiment too.
yeah,
I mean, no decision has to be perfect or permanent to just try.
pilot it. Or think about
Yeah.
what if we did, I don't know, no meeting Fridays, or no internal meetings before noon. Or, like you could think about a whole bunch of different ways to structure it that basically gave people more flexibility and more of their time back, and thought about the other changes you would have to make downstream of that. So, for example, we had to be incredibly clear about when you're doing project planning and you're setting a timeline, you should look at the calendar. How many work weeks do you have? Like, how many hours are you filling? If you're going to add another meeting, there are 32 hours of limited meeting time where everybody is available. Even fewer when you think about time zones, because my organization is fully remote. How are you structuring this? Are we staffing this way, accounting for people being off? Like, really, 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 you got to look at the whole picture. But it is doable. It is absolutely doable in more industries than you'd think.
Yeah. Amen. Okay, sorry. I totally interrupted your train of thought there, but I thought I wanted to make that point because
Yeah.
it really it just shows how impactful and what what the downstream impact can look like when one leader says, "You know what? Let's call a timeout and do something different."
Love it. One of the other things that I would suggest leaders do is get one, let go of the return to office mandates, but really think about setting up flexible work environments. I think that there is probably a mix of fully remote or hybrid, or like some people really do like coming into an office. Some people like do have needs to be in person. But if you're going to run a flexible work environment, whether it's fully remote or partially, you need to build it as if it's fully remote. And you need to think about the communication norms that you are setting, the tools that you are providing, the ways in which you're structuring meetings, the way in which communication moves across the organization, assuming that everyone is remote. And then if they're in person, great. But you know that if you are even a little bit hybrid, there's always going to be someone zooming in. You're always going to have the conference call where there's someone else on camera, like at the end of the table. How are you setting it up so that everyone is on a level playing field? And how are you both establishing and modeling communication norms such that it is still effective? This is hard. There's not a ton of people with a ton of practice for it. And you have to be really mindful about how you're creating opportunities for connection. So when you do bring people in person, how are you making that time like worth it? How are you having quarterly retreats or bi-monthly, whatever it is, the cadence that makes sense for you? How are you using that time really well? But we have seen the research in this over 2025. The return to office mandates are one of the biggest drivers of women leaving the workforce, especially moms. Having to go into an office destroys your ability to parent in a meaningful way. It sucks. So I think that every employer who is thinking about preparing themselves for the future economic workforce or labor workforce should be thinking about how they can better set up their company to enable flexible work.
Yeah, and what's unfortunate is, to your point, it is impacting moms the most because we tend to still be the ones who take the more flexible job. It doesn't matter if we are the ones who are breadwinning. We take the more flexible. I mean, and this is a large we. This is not every person and every family circumstance, but largely speaking, the women tend to have the more flexible job. The women tend to be the default parent. The women take on the large lion's share of the domestic workload and the mental labor, like CEO of your household.
Mm-hmm.
So it is impacting women more, even if we like to gaslight them and think that it's not. But I just want to call attention to your point about constructing the workplace to support FWAs. First of all, without doing that, we unfortunately have some proximity bias that can creep in,
Mm-hmm.
which continues to divide the labor force. And I know that to be true as somebody who has been a victim of that and been a study of it. But I do believe it doesn't have to matter because there is this notion of propinquity, and propinquity is essentially this feeling of being close together even when you're not. It
Mm-hmm.
is essentially akin to you and I, Amanda, being multiple states away, here, me in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you up in Brooklyn, New York, where we could become best of friends despite the fact that we're literal states away. Because if we lean in and we create propinquity, we create intentional relationships with each other, it doesn't matter if we're hip to hip. And that takes us full circle to where we started, which is it takes intentionality to build culture remotely, sure.
Yeah.
But it is so it's possible when you make the effort.
That's exactly right. And I think one of the things that candidly millennial and Gen Z leaders have a little bit of a heads up on this is that we understand how to build relationships online. I don't know about you, but my friends over the years have been over AIM. They have been in group chats. They have been like, you know, mom groups where I've never met some of these people IRL, but I know them quite well just based on like our neighborhood group chat or the Facebook groups or the Reddit, sub threads for your due date groups, whatever it might be. We know how to build relationships online. We know that it is possible to have trust and connection without ever being in the same place. That comfort makes it a little bit easier for us. Now to think about how do you operationalize that and how do you scale it and how do you create the container for that when everyone not might not have the same level of comfort. It's hard, but it is possible. And I think that is the understanding that it's possible and that you just have to write the path to it. That's the responsibility of the leader.
Yep. Amen. And I will also say, along the vein of FWAs, before we go off, I tried one at one point in time. This was after I had my first. Granted, that was 10 years ago. And I failed miserably at it. But that was as much on the organization as it was me. So I think one of our opportunities, as you're discussing and illuminating, is we have to do a better job as leaders of organizations to support that. But on the flip side, we also have to take some accountability on our own part to honor our boundaries regarding that and to know that when you make the decision to work in a more flexible circumstance, you're going to get a lot, but you're going to lose some too, and that's just part of the shtick. So
Mhm.
I will link this in the show notes too, but I have an episode that I previously recorded on what leads to burnout for high performers that I'll link that's very relevant. And the next episode that's coming up after this is on boundaries and how to actually honor those. So I will link that in the show notes. I will also link my I have a burnout self check quiz. You can get that at workingmomsmovement.com/boundaries that I will link because that is just as important in making a real flex work arrangement successful.
Mm.
Um, okay, Amanda. So moving on then, um, there is a lot of apparent advantage to the employees that I think people can deduce when they hear things like FWAs, remote work. But what do you say to the organizational leaders? Like, what would make the wins tangible enough to be sexy to a leader to want to make it work?
You will see it in employee retention. You will see it in job applications. I would say when we started posting positions after we had a 4-day work week, our staff was like in the 30 to 60 range at the time. We were getting thousands of applicants. Like the talent possibilities are really, really high. You will also very quickly feel it in your own life because one of my big fundamental beliefs is that leaders have to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. You can't just say you have a 4-day work week and then still work on Fridays. Like you gotta do the time just as much as everyone else. You've got to like model the communication you want. You've got to be present in the way you want other people to be present. If you do it, your life will be better too. Like there's a real, the Fabio expression, like if you look good, I look good. If I look good, we all look good. Like there is some real value here. If we are all taking advantage of the guardrails that we have set up, then we all will have a chance to be to rest a little bit easier. And I think that can be really hard for high achieving people to do. Like I haven't taken a vacation since I came back from maternity leave with my second daughter a year ago yesterday. I don't brag about that. That sucks. I'm being a bad boss by not taking vacation. It's like a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Vacation doesn't sound that fun right now. But it is really, I think, a reminder. I say that to myself as much as I say it to anyone else. Like, we have to model what we want people to do. And I want people to take vacation, which means I need to take vacation.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I worked for 4 different CEO administrations, and I guess the second to last one I worked for, I was his chief of staff, and I also led org strategy and culture for him. And he used to tell me 3 consistent performance reviews in a row. He's like, Courtney, you need to learn to turn down the volume.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, Homeboy is a CEO of a couple $1 billion, 12,000 person organization, and he brags about not taking his computer on vacations. Part of it's shit rolls downstream.
Yeah.
So like he had people like me there to catch his work. But at the same time, I didn't fully appreciate at the time how meaningful of an action that was. It wasn't until I started this work that I realized, wow, what a beautiful model. Because it would be so easy for him to throw excuses and
Yeah.
to pretend and complain about how busy he is. But instead, he knew that he was surrounded by very capable people and really encouraged us to do the same. So I really love that you called that out. Really well done.
Thank you.
Okay, so last question that I have for you is around guarding your time and energy. It is something you talked about in the book, and I would love to just hear the cliff notes directly from you. So that way our listeners can actually honor what's important to them, as opposed to always feeling that like work has to be that thing for them.
So this has been a journey for me, and I write about this at length in When We're in Charge. I worked presidential campaigns, which are 100-hour weeks, and then I started Run for Something, and it took me 2 years to get okay not working on Saturdays. I have gone from that 9 years later to working 4 days a week and having interesting side projects and time with my kids, partially because I now have children and because I really understood that my work, as much as I love it, will never love me back. And to understand that and to really internalize that means that I don't have to give everything to it. I can give enough to it that I am good and effective and ambitious. That doesn't change my ambition. I'm incredibly ambitious, but I am ambitious for more than just my job. I'm ambitious for a joyful life that includes interesting work that is well compensated and that allows me to have time with my family and friends and the community that I love. That is what I am ambitious for. And that changing relationship to ambition and to my profession and how it relates to my identity, I think has forced me and pushed me to be so intentional with how I have set up the boundaries and the guardrails of my life. And you notice I keep coming back to these term guardrails because I think as a boss, people can set boundaries for themselves. I, as the company or the employer, set guardrails. I create the outside of a container. They create their outside. I create our outside. It is a different way of thinking about how I give people the opportunity to have flexibility, knowing where the edges are. Um, it has been so difficult, especially now that I have 2 tiny kids. It is so, so difficult. And also, I am so grateful that I have built a company where this is possible. Like my life is better because I built a company where everyone can have Fridays off and where everyone can, for the most part, log off around 5, 6 o'clock as their day is done. And if they need to leave to go to their kids' show on a 9:30 on a Friday morning, they can do it, no questions asked, or a Thursday morning. And if they need to go pick up their kid from school because they're sick, or they need to go take them to the dentist, or they just need a couple hours away from work because the news is so soul crushing, they can do that because they know what success looks like at their jobs and they know what my expectations are and they know how to communicate it if they're not going to hit those goals or those timelines. Because all of that is clear and we've done the work to create those communication pathways, people can be a little bit more in charge of their life and I can be a little bit more in charge of mine.
Yeah, I mean, how cool to be a steward of an environment like that, Amanda. But also going back to where we started about the butterfly effect, you are making not just a difference on your own life and the employees that you have inside your organization, but their families and the people that they engage with day to day and the examples that they get to set. So it is just a really powerful thing that you've created.
Yeah.
And I will once again say that the episode that I'm going to link inside the show notes and the one that I'm about to that will record and air the following week, I will be telling a very similar story where, similar to you, Amanda, I call it giving myself away for free. I used to give myself away for free a lot to work. And using your language, it never loved me back. And it was a very, very hard lesson, but one that I'm grateful that I learned early enough. My boys were older, unfortunately, when that happened. And yet I still get a lot of time with them left. So it's not like their entire childhood left before I learned that hard lesson. Okay, so let's pivot to the lightning round questions. First, Amanda, what is your go-to stress busting activity?
I read romance novels.
Ooh, I like that. Do you
Yeah,
do you read or do you listen?
read. I have a Kindle. I read. I like being able to make the font a little bit bigger. And my husband goes to bed a little bit before me, so I tend to read after he goes to sleep.
That's awesome. Second, what's the last book or podcast that you loved?
Um, I am obsessed with Jam Session, which is like a pop culture podcast on The Ringer. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't listen to a lot of music. I never see any movies. So it's really fun to listen to people have opinions about things I have no opinions about. Like, do they like this movie or hate this movie? I don't know. I don't care. It's like just hanging out with people talking about something that I don't have any context for, but they seem to be having a good time. And I really appreciate that.
That's so funny. I mean, it it really allows you a complete mental release, I'm sure, because you don't have an opinion.
You know what? I don't know if they're right that the movie was bad, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, particularly in your line of work, Amanda, where you are surrounded by opinions. Like that is
Yes.
quite literally the work that you do.
Mm-hmm.
That must be very liberating to be in a space, even if just for a 30-minute podcast where you get to not have an opinion or
It's very freeing to know nothing and have no context. I can
yeah,
never get mad, which is nice.
yeah, that is fantastic. Okay, last question. If you could wave a magic wand, what task would you eliminate forever?
Um, hate folding laundry. Now, to be fair, I don't fold my kids' clothes. I don't believe in folding kids' clothes. Um, but I also hate folding our clothes, and I'm very fortunate my husband does most of it. But man, do I hate it. I would just do straight out of the laundry hamper clean, it back into the laundry hamper dirty if I could.
And is that what you do with the kids? Is you just throw them in a drawer?
Throw them in the drawer. We've got big girl's drawer, little girl's drawer, pajamas, socks and underwear, and then some of the stuff gets hung up. But why would I fold a 3-year-old's clothes? Why would I
Yeah.
do that? That's insane
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. Yeah, we did that with one of my clients. She was struggling through the summer. I was like, you just need baskets. Like you have a basket for the clean, a basket for the dirty. They're going to wear the same outfits over and over summer. Just like pick them out. I think it's genius. For you though, I would argue, Amanda, you need a house manager. It's life-changing. That is the one thing, like giving up laundry is just so liberating.
I mean, I have already completely delegated meal planning, grocery shopping, and cooking to my husband.
Yeah.
And by delegated, I mean I don't care. If I was on my own druthers, I would just eat eggs every day. So like, great. That is enough. I'm very lucky that I married very well and
Yeah.
that he will handle all of that. But man, laundry drives me nuts.
I get it. I get it. Okay, so before we drop, how can people reach you? And I'll also, of course, link the book in the show notes.
I am all over the internet, unfortunately. You can find me on all the different platforms, either Amanda Litman or Amanda Litm on Instagram. And then I'm writing weekly on Substack at amandalitman.substack.com.
Perfect. Well, I will include those in the show notes. Amanda, thank you for joining. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. I will link both Amanda's information and my boundaries self-check quiz and the other two episodes that I referenced. But until next time, friends, if nobody's told you lately, you're doing a great job. You've got this, mama. If this conversation resonated, especially the parts about overgiving, blurred boundaries, or feeling like work takes more than it gives, I want you to tune in to episode 67 next. It's called Why Burnout Sneaks Up on High Performers and What It's Really Telling You. And it connects the dots between capability, responsibility, and why burnout isn't a personal failure. It's just information. That episode will help you understand what your exhaustion is trying to tell you and what needs to change next. I'm going to link it for you. So go watch that once you're done.